Today's video may contain content that some viewers may be sensitive to, and as such, viewer discretion is advised. If you have a story you want to send my way, please go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. The way that our house is set up, there's a staircase leading up to the master suite, and it's a 90-degree angle, no vents. One night, about 2 months ago, my boyfriend is standing at the end of the bed looking towards the door, which is in a little hallway, so I couldn't see it from the bed. He was weirded out, because there was a strong draft coming from under the door, but that's impossible, based on how the staircase is. Then, I see him and my cats turn towards the door and react at the same time, looking shocked. And I hear the door creaking open and then slam shut. There was nobody there. Then, there was the sound of loud stomping running up and down the stairs, up and down for a good 5 minutes. There was nobody in the house. And every couple of nights for about a week or two, this running and banging up and down the stairs happened. It happened so much to the point where we almost got used to it, and would try to drown it out. Then it stopped just as suddenly as it started. There were a few weird little occurrences, doors opening by themselves, small noises, etc., but nothing crazy. Our back door has a storm door that has a dog door on it, and then there is the actual back door that is solid. The back door leads into a sunroom that is open to our backyard. We leave the door open so the dogs can go in and out of the storm door, and then around 7-ish at night, we call everyone inside and close the door for the night. Information that's very important for this next encounter is that my Shih Tzu, Oatmeal, hates going outside and will only go if we are with him. If I put him outside by himself, he claws and barks at the door and squeezes himself between the storm door and the back door. About a month ago, after calling everyone in, I was watching a movie downstairs and my boyfriend was upstairs playing video games. About an hour or so into the movie, I hear scratching at the back door. I think it must be one of our cats because it's hard to get them inside from the sunroom. I go to let them in, and it isn't a cat. It's my Shih Tzu, Oatmeal. I pick him up and love on him and tell him I'm sorry that we locked him out. He growls at me and runs off. Oatmeal's kinda rude, so I don't think anything of it. About 30 minutes later, my boyfriend comes downstairs, and I tell him that he locked Oatmeal outside when he called all the dogs in. He insists that Oatmeal's been upstairs with him this whole time, in his lap, making it hard to play games. We have a kind of half-joking but mostly serious argument, because we both insisted on seeing Oatmeal in 2 different places at once. I shrug it off and think my boyfriend just didn't want to admit that he locked Oatmeal out. No biggie. About 2 weeks ago, I wake up for work and take Oatmeal downstairs with me, and I close the bedroom behind me, so Odie doesn't run back upstairs and bother my boyfriend while he's sleeping. I do this pretty much every day. I go to work, come home, and my boyfriend is telling me how Odie got in trouble the night before, after I fell asleep, and said that he locked him downstairs as punishment. I'm laughing, because, again, my dog is rude, and I ask him when he decided to soften up and let Odie back into the bedroom. And he very seriously insists that he didn't. I tell him that Odie was sleeping by my feet that morning, and then I took him downstairs with me. We have another argument, both insisting that he was in 2 different places. About a week ago, we were watching TV. Odie is sleeping by my feet as always. It gets late, so we turn everything off and are just laying there watching videos on our phones until we get sleepy. I feel something climb up in between us and circle a few times before settling in against my back. I can feel my boyfriend petting it. I thought it was a little weird because I could still feel Odie on my feet, and my cat usually lays on top of me. He insists on being on top of me, and he'll climb back up if I push him off. But I just assume it's my cat anyways, because why would it be anything else? About 5 minutes later, I hear Oatmeal's growl come from in between me and him, and my boyfriend hurries to turn on the light as something runs off the bed. Oatmeal is sleeping soundly by my feet, and my cat is sleeping in a chair across the room. My boyfriend throws himself out of the bed and starts searching the entire room in a panic, going through the bathroom cabinets, the dirty laundry, under the bed. He literally had a gun and a flashlight and is hunting in the room, panicked. He said that he was petting what he thought was Oatmeal, but when he got to his head, it was completely hairless, and it growled and tried to bite him and then ran off. We were up for hours before finally falling asleep with the lights on. At this point, I'm convinced it's not a ghost problem, but some sort of skinwalker or doppelganger monster plaguing the house. Over the next few days, we heard some strange noises and little things, but nothing huge. We talked to some people and decided to try to cleanse the house. So we were going to the metaphysical store to get supplies. As we're getting ourselves together, I hear 3 knocks come from the top of the stairs. I ask my boyfriend if he heard them, and then there is another 3 knocks. This time louder and more separated, more deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. We leave the house. When we get back, we decided to leave this stuff in the car until we are prepared enough to do it, because we didn't want to make whatever this thing is angry. But I did bring in a worry stone that I got. I used to have one from when I went to Ireland that I'd carry in my pocket, but I lost it. I put the worry stone in my nightstand, and we spent that evening downstairs. All the animals were downstairs with us, and the bedroom door was shut. A few hours later, I go upstairs to shower, and I notice something sitting in my cat's water fountain. And it's my worry stone. My stomach freaking dropped. So then, the next night, we're at dinner with my boyfriend's mom, and she's telling me all about this weird stuff in the house that I didn't know about, including a mailbox in the wall in the downstairs closet. She says she assumed they used it to hide money, which I think is odd, but I decided to entertain that possibility until I actually went home and saw the mailbox. It's a tiny, bright red mailbox that cut a hole and anchored it into the closet. The back space of the mailbox is gone, and opens into a crawl space between the wall and the back of the fireplace. There is a string in the mailbox that lowers into the cavity. Why would someone hide money there? It's so obvious. Even if they were, why the string? Once you found the mailbox, you found the string. If the money falls out of the string, you have to cut the wall open to retrieve it. I made them cut a hole at the bottom of the wall, but we didn't find anything back there. Whatever they were lowering into the wall is long gone. That mailbox, though, gives me the heebie-jeebies, but I decided to leave it alone. The next day, I'm at work, and I'm telling my coworker about the strange tiny mailbox, and a pair of my grooming shears is thrown onto the floor for my shear holder in front of both of us. We caught it on the security camera. My coworker was so freaked out that she had to have the manager go review the footage. I did close a drawer before the shears fell, but I've tried to recreate it, and couldn't. They're soft-closed drawers. I tried physically shaking the station, and even body slamming it, trying to make my shears fall, and I couldn't. At the exact same time this is happening, My boyfriend calls me from the home and tells me that everything is okay, but that something tried to catch the house on fire. He'd been burning his mom's old tax documents for her for the past few days. It was about 10 years of paperwork, and it's hot here in Texas, so he split it up. He'd been burning the last batch. He went upstairs to grab something, and came down, and something had closed the flue, and the house was filling with smoke. He had to extinguish the fire, which was reaching out of the fireplace, and evacuate the animals and air out the house. It's been like 3 days, and it still smells a little smoky in here. Again, little occurrences happen of weird noises, doors opening and closing, hearing walking upstairs or on the stairs. Keep in mind, we've been sleeping with the lights on, and I refuse to be in the house alone. Last night, around 2 a.m., we are both awake and decide to go downstairs and grab a snack. Also let the dogs out. My boyfriend is outside with the dogs, and I hear clear as day, loud thumping footsteps in our room upstairs. I go outside, and then we both come back in. We're on the couch, and the light in our dining room is flickering, and I asked him if he noticed, and he tells me that it started flickering when I got home. He tells me that's how I knew that I was home, and he met me down at my car earlier that day. He said it hadn't flickered all day until I got home, and now that we were talking about it, the flickering got worse. On and off, on and off, on and off. We decide to turn the lights off and go back upstairs. Then, upstairs in our bathroom, the light bulb in our wax melter bursts mysteriously. He goes downstairs to the laundry room, and our laundry room light all of a sudden won't turn on, when it was just on less than 30 minutes ago. He comes back upstairs, we lock our bedroom door and try our best to go to bed. This morning, all the lights are working fine, until I'm out in my craft shed where the electricity starts going on and off randomly. Everything all at once, like the breaker is being switched back and forth, and then it just stops. After a few days of flickering and strange noises, and doors opening and closing, we cleansed and salted the property. Here's to hoping this is the end of it. It would be nice to be able to sleep with the lights off again. Both me and my boyfriend are very sure that we have a ghostly tenant living with us. What or whoever our ghostly friend is, there can be months between either of us encountering them, but they always come back. I'll tell a few stories off the top of my head. To start off, I've been sort of scared of entrances or whatever apartment I have lived in ever since I moved out of my parents' home. The first apartment that I lived in was with my fiancé at the time. It had a long hallway, and I was terrified of it. I never knew why. That hallway was just scary. And fast forward several years, and me and my fiancé broke up, and I moved out to a little studio apartment. There, I was terrified of the immediate area by the front door once again. I had to have the lights on that illuminate the front door at night. I never saw anything, I just couldn't sleep without the lights on. But I met my current boyfriend, and a few years later we moved to a single-bedroom apartment together because we needed more room. That's where we live now. And this is where I've started seeing them. A couple years ago, late in the evening, I came out of the bathroom, once again right by the front door, and was scared immediately. I was sure that I felt a person or something there. There was nothing to be seen. But I swear that they were right there, and that they were spooked by me suddenly emerging from the bathroom and they fled into the kitchen. I saw nothing, but the feeling was so strong that I had to speak out loud to them. I apologized to the seemingly empty space, saying that I didn't mean to spook them. I said I'm just going to grab my keys and go out for a smoke, and then I would be back in a few minutes, drop off my keys, and go to bed. It felt really weird to be speaking to an empty space, but I swear that ghostly tenant was there, hiding from me, because they were spooked by me more than I was spooked by the whole situation. And I did thusly. I took my keys, went for a smoke, dropped off my keys, and then went to bed as I said I would. Ever since, both me and my boyfriend have seen them once in a while. Always near the front door. The very space that I have been scared of for years in every apartment that I have lived in. It's a shadow, the size of a tallish man. A few months after the spooking bathroom incident, my boyfriend and I noticed a particular thing. Our bathroom is very small, and my boyfriend is quite tall. He's always requested that we keep the doors of the little cabinet above the sink, where the toothbrushes and such things are, closed. If the mirror doors of that thing are open, he could easily hit his head on the right door when he gets up from the toilet. And I did thusly, always closing them. But they didn't stay closed. Both of us were kind of annoyed by that. I was wondering why he kept leaving the damn things open when he specifically requested me keep them closed. And he was wondering why I always forgot to close them. One day, the topic came up, and we realized both of us kept constantly closing them, but we only ever opened them to grab a toothbrush, and always closed them after ourselves. There's a magnet on them, so they don't just swing open by themselves. We realized that this has been going on for months, and once we realized that, we both out loud asked the doors to be closed, and they've stayed closed ever since. Just a few days ago, I was sitting in the kitchen. I have my laptop set up on the kitchen table in the corner of the kitchen. It's in the corner with a wall to my left and a window behind me. From this position, I have the small kitchen in front of me, and I can see the entryway of our apartment with my peripheral vision, as well as the bathroom door. To my right is the living room, which I can also see in my peripheral vision. The apartment is kind of like a loop, if you will. Fun for our kid since he can run in a loop around the apartment. So, there I was, watching a live stream around 11 p.m. Suddenly, I saw movement at the entryway, so I looked up, thinking my boyfriend must have woken up and was coming to grab a glass of water or to check up on me. But no. What I saw was a shadow. It's early spring here, so it's dark but not pitch black anymore at this time of day. The shadow, about the size of a tallish man, was clearly darker than the surroundings, and making its way to the kitchen. I was spooked and just looked at it, or them, because I realized our ghostly tenant was back after being gone for months. Just a moment after I looked up from my laptop at the shadow, they stopped briefly and retreated back to the entryway as if they were going to come to the kitchen, but changed their mind because I saw them. I thought nothing of it. I was just a bit spooked. About a minute later, I saw something to my right. It was them again, the shadow, trying to enter the kitchen from the living room side. I once again looked up from my screen to look at them, and again they retreated back and would not enter the kitchen. I was once again spooked, but said nothing. About 15 minutes passed, and I got up to get myself a snack from the kitchen cabinet. And I was rummaging through the snacks to find something that I would like, and then I heard a metallic bang clear as day behind my back. It was like two pots being banged together. It was quite a loud sound. All the pots and pans are neatly stored where they belong, and there was nothing behind my back that could have suddenly made that sound. I have no explanation for that. Our dog also refused to sleep in his own bed, in the living room, 5 meters from me. He insisted on sleeping in the kitchen corner, right behind my chair as I was watching the live stream. I would greatly appreciate if anyone has any idea as to what or who our ghostly tenant might be. Have they always been the reason that I've been uncomfortable of entryways? Have they always been there, but I've never seen them until in this apartment? If so, why would that be? Why do they seem to be so skittish? My understanding and feeling is that they're quite shy, as if they want to be noticed, but wouldn't come to the kitchen if they were seen, but then still made that metallic sound short after. What could I do if I noticed them trying to come to the same space with me? Should I out loud speak and invite them to sit with me, and make a cup of tea for them as a friendly gesture? Or should I just ignore them? When I was a young kid, my mother would take me and my younger brother, and sometimes my older brother, to my grandparents' house. They lived around an hour away from us and near a beach. I used to love visiting them, and usually we would see them at every chance we got, school breaks and such, and we would spend a few nights there. The house was big, and usually we would stay in the guest room. There was also a loft where old toys and various unused items were stored. During the daytime, the house was relatively fine and not very creepy. Sure, I didn't like going upstairs on my own, but I was just a paranoid kid. However, when it got dark out, I had a real problem about the house. Seeing as it was a holiday, my mother would let me and my brothers stay up late downstairs in the living room, and we would watch whatever was on TV. At this point, my grandparents were already in bed and asleep upstairs. Now, the house was old and previously owned, but we never learned much about who owned it before my grandparents. The house would creak as the pipes would settle, and you could hear when someone was upstairs as the floorboards would also creak. I always felt unsettled when night rolled around. In the living room, there was massive glass doors that overlooked the garden and also the main road outside. When it got dark, it got pitch black. I would never look outside the windows when it got dark in fear that I would see something. I would beg for my mother to close the curtains, and when she would, I would feel relatively at ease. When either my younger brother or I had to use the bathroom, we would ask our mother to accompany us. There were 2 bathrooms in the house, one downstairs and one upstairs, and since we were downstairs, we would use that one. To get to the bathroom, you had to walk along a hallway and turn left. To your right was the stairs leading upstairs, and I would always remember distinctly that I would keep my head straight whilst walking to the bathroom, to avoid looking up the stairs and at the landing. It was usually pitch black because that's how my grandparents liked it, whilst they slept. I always had an eerie sense that someone was watching, or that something was lurking in the dark. Honestly, it felt as though it was a feminine presence. Mind you, I loved anything scary as a kid, and yes, my imagination was wild. But I've had definite paranormal and scary experiences before. I just knew when something was real and when it was just my imagination. One night when laying in bed, which I shared with my younger brother and mother, I had someone come in downstairs. Sometimes my aunt, my mother's sister, who still lived at home, would work nights and come home during the night. I definitely heard someone come in and walk around downstairs. And it sounded as though they had heavy boots on. I thought nothing of it at the time and fell back asleep. In the morning, I told my mother about it, and after some discussing, we realized that my aunt hadn't been working the night shift that night. Not that creepy, just confusing. Everything got checked, the doors, the windows, the locks. Everything was perfectly in place, and no one admitted to being downstairs that night. It was left unexplained, and I forgot about it. Now, the loft that I had mentioned was positioned above the house, so that it was mostly above the guest room that we would stay in. Sometimes, during the day, when I felt brave enough to lounge in the guest room, I would hear noises up there. Sometimes it was pigeons that had landed on the roof, and the sound of them walking about traveled through the loft, and that's what I heard. But sometimes, I would hear different noises. And not the pipes resting or the house settling. It sounded like footsteps. Granted, they were light footsteps, but I was definitely very sure of it. Now, all of these little things happened over years and years. None of it concerned me too much, and my stays at the house remained relatively enjoyable. I started a conversation with my mother about it not too long ago, about how the house would sometimes feel unsettling, and that it definitely felt like we were being watched. My mother agreed, and she isn't someone to believe in spirits or anything of that sort, but she had told me that something about the guest bedroom made her feel uneasy. She had also mentioned that she never liked to sleep with her back to the door. Even my aunt agreed. Something always felt off about upstairs. And then I learned that while the guest room was being decorated and the wallpaper was stripped, there was writing on the wall. I'm not exactly sure what the writing said, but it wasn't measurements or markings that a decorator would leave. It was messages. I'm pretty sure one of the pieces of writing was someone declaring their love for another person. I'm also not sure how old they could be, but my grandparents first moved into that house when I was a baby. I mean, only a few months old, and I'm now nearly 18. So, they could be anything from 20 years old. I'm also not sure how long the house had been for sale, or the period of time between its last owners and my grandparents. Probably just my paranoia, but also, maybe not. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I noticed a lot of paranormal stuff happening at my mom's house. My parents were separated. One night when I was staying with my mom, we were having a fire in the backyard, and I brought up seeing shadow people. It was always on the stairs, but I didn't tell her about the stairs part, just about seeing people. Anyway, it freaked my mom out, and she immediately started asking me what I was seeing and what else was going on. And I really didn't know how to describe it, and didn't really even think about ghosts back then. I didn't really give her a good explanation or description about anything that I experienced, and so she started to tell me about what she was experiencing and seeing. She told me, and still tells me to this day, that she would always see a little boy, a bit older than me, on those stairs. Not every day, but every time she did the dishes, he was there. Even on nights that I was at my dad's house, she could swear she would hear me coming up those stairs, and she would see the little boy soon after. So that was kind of my introduction to ghosts, and the thought of ghosts, and it really freaked me out. So probably about 3 years go on with occasional stuff happening, and my mom and my stepdad break up. so once out of that house, I thought things would disappear, because nothing ever happened to me at my dad's house. But that same year that my mom moved out, my aunt, who I was very close with, had died. I had stayed with her for 2 weeks, about 3 to 4 days before she died. And the day that I found out, I saw her walk next to my bed, but it seemed like she was on her knees walking. And it was really, really weird and really scary, because I saw that it was her and felt her there before I could even see her. And that's what made me look. A couple of weeks go by. We're in California for her funeral, and I was sleeping on her couch, and I felt her sit next to me. It was right by my chest, and that's always how she tucked me in. And after that, nothing happened with her. The next thing to happen was her brother, my uncle, drank himself to death, and he paid me and my dad a visit by moving wine glasses, knocking something off the counter, can't remember what it was, and running down the hallway and slamming a door, and this was all in the matter of minutes. Less than 8 to 10 minutes, all of this happened, back to back to back. And that was my dad's first ever paranormal experience. We both heard and saw everything happen, but he still tries to play it off like it was nothing. But I know that it freaked him out by his eyes. I could see in my dad's eyes that he was freaked out and knew damn well who that was. Anyways, well, things kind of cooled off for about a decade. A little less than a decade after that happened, nothing happened at all. And it was so nice, because growing up, I was so scared always. And then I got used to nothing happening, and wasn't scared anymore. It was a miracle. I thought I would be scared forever. I slept with a blanket over my head until I was 17 or 18, which then leads me to last December. My brother committed suicide. I was working in a small village in Alaska, and was actually driving home when my mom called me and told me that he was no longer alive. I got home about midnight, maybe 11, I can't remember, but my girlfriend knew what had happened because my mom called her, so she just hugged me. We talked for a while, and she ended up going to bed once everything was said. I wanted to stay up. I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to sleep, and I cried for probably 2 hours after she went to bed. I just couldn't stop. And when I finally felt numb from all of the crying, I saw him right next to me by my pantry. And all the ghosts I've ever seen, they were never as clear as him. I saw him front and center. He looked opaque, rather than just a shadow. It's like I could see him, but also right through him. And a couple of nights later, I saw him again, in the same area, but he wasn't as clear. He was more of a shadow that time, but I knew it was him again. I haven't seen him since, and haven't experienced anything since, but it was so nice. So nice seeing him and not being scared. I felt so at ease, and I was thankful seeing all of my family members after they'd passed. My brother passing was hard, but seeing him made me appreciate everything that he was. I love him so much, and I always will. Also, in that moment, it made me so happy realizing that I'm not afraid of ghosts anymore. I lived so much of my life afraid of them, and it's all over with. Thank God to maturing and changing ways. To end this long story off, I just want to say that me and my mom still have no idea who that little boy could have been, because I've only seen family after moving out of that house, and my mom growing up had only seen family too. So, as I've said before, I live in England. I lived in a small market town in Lincolnshire for many years. I learned that there was an old Victorian asylum on the outskirts of town that was being partially torn down and made into flats, apartments, and houses. So I decided with my now ex-boyfriend to check it out on the daytime before we were no longer able to. And we packed up our camcorder, EMF meter, and our phones and walked the 3 miles to the asylum. The place is set back well away from the road, and you have to walk down a tree-lined path to get to it. I'm not gonna lie, the view of the local countryside was beautiful. So we get there, and immediately see it's a building site, but something was strange. It wasn't locked up. We could walk straight in. There was rubble everywhere, and in the rubble, clipboards, hard hats, and other PPE was strewn across it. It was like something had scared the crap out of them, and they had just down-tooled right where they were, and left in a massive hurry. Adding to this ominous picture was the sound of crows cawing loudly. It's already creepy and oppressive in the daytime, and I was already on edge, but not from being caught trespassing, just from the feel of this place. As I said in my other post, I am an empath, and just standing in the grounds was making me want to cry. All I could feel was sadness and desperation. I felt all this before I even set foot into one of the old dilapidated buildings. We finally draw up our courage and go into the first building. We walked up a set of stairs with an old cast iron railing. The place had been partially torn down, and there were no individual rooms, just massive rooms and an old bathroom. The feeling of overwhelming sadness was getting stronger, and at times I wanted to cry. We move on up the stairs, and on this level there's a small windowless room from what I can only imagine were padded cells at one point. Again, the sadness and desperation wells up inside me. We walk further into the building, and notice a very old lift that has the doors stuck open. We have the camcorder running, and the EMF meter is on. We're taking pictures on our phones, too. The EMF has stayed silent, and I'm not sure why. Surely it should be going crazy. I'm feeling it, so why hadn't the EMF gone off? We exit the first building, and make our way to the one next to it and enter. And we're walking around, taking pictures on the ground floor before we head up the stairs. We walk into this massive room. I'm not sure if it's an old ward or day room or what. The windows were huge and the room was flooded with light. We were only just inside this room when I get to this overwhelming feeling of anger hit me. From nowhere. I'm not talking normal anger. Whoever it was absolutely furious. The hair on the back of my neck was standing on end. I turn to my ex and I tell him, "We need to get out of this room, now." He turns to look at me, and as he does, the EMF and the camcorder turn themselves off. Our phones lose signal, and the camera on my phone is no longer working. Let me tell you, I have never run through a room so fast in my life. Clearly, something did not want us there nosing around. As soon as we step out of that room, everything turns back on. Our phones have signal, and my camera app is working again. We carry on, looking around, but I'm much more subdued. I'm looking at the tiles in the wall and the corridors, wondering why anyone would choose to have a crap brown color rather than green or blue, or even beige. We look around the other buildings and nothing else has happened. I'm still feeling the overwhelming sense of sadness and I want to cry. And then we reach what was clearly a children's wing. They'd painted a picture of the ocean and sea creatures on one wall. This place was open until the mid-1980s. And that was enough for me. I had to leave before I broke down completely. We did manage to get some interesting pictures on my phone, but nothing on the camcorder. That had to be one of the scariest haunted buildings I had ever been in. But one question nearly 10 years later still bugs me. Why did the digital blackout only happen in that big room? Why didn't it happen in any of the padded cells? When I was 7, I used to live in the middle of nowhere, and I do mean nowhere. Our next door neighbor was a 10-minute drive. The nearest town, if you can even call it that, more like a street with homes on it, was about 20, and the nearest form of city or town larger than that was about an hour and a half. The house itself was a typical farmhouse, and I was in the first bedroom with a view to the long driveway. While we stayed there, it always felt odd to me. Maybe because we were so far from anywhere, or maybe it was the vibe, but it was here that I had this experience. My first ever experience, and I'll never forget it. On one night, I awoke to the sounds of quiet talking. It first sounded like that loud whisper when you're trying to be quiet, but have more volume than you need. At first, I thought it was my parents, since I was very close to where the kitchen was, but as I sat and listened, and the whispering became louder, I noticed that these were not my parents, but rather two male voices. My first thought wasn't anything supernatural, but rather simply thieves. I just sat there listening to them as they got louder and louder. The two were just talking, and one would ask simple questions like, "What is this thing?" Or, "What is that thing holding that thing up?" And the second would answer, but be so beyond wrong, but yet have that tone of just simply answering a question. At this time, the voices sounded like they were right beside me, just talking away. And as I turned my eyes around, the curious one asked about an object in my room that I was looking at. And of course, the second one would answer it, but get it super wrong. These voices that sounded like they were right beside me were somehow using my eyes to look. Needless to say, I'm a kid at this point, and I'm scared. And what does a kid do when they're scared? And they go to their parents. I snuck into their room and went to sleep between them, but before that, the first asked, "Are you sure that kid's not aware of us?" The second responded, "Of course not." That really freaked me out. That was my first ever experience with something that I just could not explain, and that was the only time I ever heard of the two. I'm in my 30s now, and honestly, I have a few thoughts on it, but I'm more curious if anyone else has ever had an experience like this before, of having heard two phantom voices, with one asking questions, and the other just being an idiot. So this, my friends, was yet another Paranormal Stories collection. The last one was on the 13th of last month. This one is on the 4th of this month, so less than a month between the two, which is not a common thing for my channel anymore as far as paranormal stories go. With that said, as I said in that video, I requested quite a few stories and surprisingly got a ton of responses, so figured I would throw another one out there. Of course, I do have more paranormal stories to tell you all, but it'll be in the video. They'll be in the video next week, which is a Reddit stories collection, a Wednesday Reddit stories collection. So they'll be mixed in with some other beautiful stories, just like true scary stories in general, and some subscription, some subscriber submitted stories. Holy hell, that was hard to say. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button to let me know you liked it. You can also subscribe to the channel if you're new and liked what you heard. And if you're feeling ever so bold, you can leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts. Those thoughts can be on anything. On me, on the video, on the stories, on my content about what kind of t-shirt you just purchased, about your favorite kind of candy. How good was that last chocolate bar that you ate? Did you have any chips lately? I had some chips today. They were good. My point is, whatever you want to put in the comment is always accepted. And I'll respond, most likely, with something related to whatever you say. So, anyways, I hope you all have a beautiful day. And I hope I see you in the next video. But, my friends, until that moment comes, I hope that you sleep well.